Hello and welcome to the 9th meetup of the Formbird Professionals Community. Thank you for joining us live. And for those watching this recording in the future, my name is Paul H, which is Housekeeping. I'm going to introduce our fellow presenters and give you a bit of a rundown of what we're going to do today. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Formbird. Formbird is a low-code platform, I should say, which we build a range of enterprise applications upon. The Fleet Professionals Community is a place where fleet professionals and members of the Formbird Fleet family come together from across Australia to discuss common issues and share their domain knowledge with each other. We hope to build a collective knowledge base around Formbird Fleet that will give us all, that will guide us into the future. As part of the community, please make suggestions, make comments, tell me what you think. Where's Michelle Mullo? Because she's got some suggestions coming up. So hopefully she'll be on later on. Okay, so what's on today? Today, Adam and Paul are going to update us about some new feature in a section that Adam calls Have Your Say. Well, it's not that, but it ends with Have Your Say.
It's a bit of that.
It ends with a Have Your Say. And so we've got tweaks to fuel import. And also we've got some, I don't know, you have to wait for Adam. It's too exciting for me to say. Then we have a roundup from Mark, and who went to IPWEA. Mark and Ian both went to IPWEA last week. And Michelle has something she's going to tell us about. Okay, in the news is Mark and Ian went to IPWEA last week. So Mark, will you tell us about IPWEA?
And it's IPWEA. They will tell you very carefully that's IPWEA.
Sorry.
This was the Fleet conference in Brisbane. They're actually moving it, I think, down to Gold Coast next year, so a big move. It was probably, I think the combination of COVID and the relevance and floods and everything else meant the numbers were relatively low. We had quite a successful time there in terms of presenting and catching up with people. This will be the 5th time I think we've been, or 6th time we've been, and 3rd time as kind of a, as a participant sponsor and what have you. The range of sessions on. It's really, I think, the relevance of conferences are diminishing as an information provision process, but I think it's the informal conversations and the normal human social stuff which is really important as part of these conferences.
Okay, so Mark, you presented. So what did you actually present?
So we presented on, it wasn't really on our technology, but I suppose it's looking at our theory, our practice of moving from data collection to communications. And so it was all about the fact that, modern software no longer is simply recording the history and maintaining a history reserve as we did in filing cabinets, and moving towards a communications model, which is really sort of our mantra around our technology, is that we're moving from data collection to communications, and during that communication process, you're collecting data, and it's going to be the most accurate data because the person who is collecting it and interacting with it should know what they're collecting and interacting. So it's not 2nd person or 3rd person.
Well, was there any sort of from a technological point of view, anything that you thought was sort of on everyone's lips that everyone wanted to talk about?
Look, probably the biggest topic remains and is EVs. There's a hell of a lot of discussion about them because councils themselves, IPWEA is very local government based, whether it be very local government or state-based government. And EVs are probably relatively topical. Not a hell of a lot around them, other than that there was sort of mind-boggling. There was an interesting session by Ivico, who sort of got up very grumpily and sort of wanted to defer the whole conversation on EVs because they're not they're either not tackling it or they don't, they just don't, they get it was almost a grumpy stop raising this issue about EVs until the market actually gets there, which was kind of a very strange approach to marketing your future technology. But other than that, there was a number of interesting conversations around them in terms of, you know, where it's all heading, but there was nothing that you'd actually take away and say that's a real change in policy. And there are a lot of people having, you know, testing out small fleets, small numbers, and particularly looking at them for specific solutions where, you know, they're very suited, whether it be, you know, obviously cleaning equipment and, you know, not just vehicles and you know, medium-sized vehicles, some of the light plant and what have you, that really is becoming
now Ian, just take yourself off mute for a second, and Mark, you just check if there's anybody in the waiting room.
Yeah, it's no one there.
And Ian, was there anything that you felt that was a takeaway from IPWA?
I think that the people that arrived got there by virtue of they were allowed to go. You know, so we really struggled with the floods in northern New South Wales and such like. So a lot of regulars that we've met over the last 3 years were unable to attend. So, but saying that, we had people down from Cairns and Cookshire and Hinchinbrook, so far north Queensland, coming up from Victoria. So it was a worthwhile exercise in terms of topics. There was an interesting topic about tyres. Yeah, it was good. It was good to see Mark on stage too.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So Mark did okay.
I felt bad, as always. You can never give a speech without feeling like you failed it. But anyway, we had plenty of good feedback.
Well, they do say that it's something like, I'm not quite sure what order, the death of a loved one, moving house, and public speaking are the three things people most hate. So, okay, let's move on. So look, in other news, which thank you, Mark, for that news. Thank you, Ian, for that news. In other news, I just wanted to tell everyone a really, really quick story. One of Formbird's associates, in fact, the guy that I work with designing logos, he's actually based in Ukraine, and I've worked with him for a few years. So he's fortunately in an area which has not yet come under Russian control and may well never, because it's not terribly strategic. It's more of a sort of a holiday village. And but for safety reasons, he sent both his children and wife across the border into Romania, where they were picked up by a German couple. A Russian couple would be wrong. A German couple that took them home and looking after them. But he's currently sort of sitting around and helping with some voluntary work. Obviously, some people outside of his area, their homes have been hit by bombs, and so they've lost blankets, and you know, they've got holes in their houses. So people are doing home handyman jobs to try and patch up things. So that's just a little bit of a break from, you know, Fleet, and it's hard to believe that we're actually involved in international conflict. I mean, Formbird and so on. Anyway, that's that. And then housekeeping. I spoke to Michelle. I don't know whether Michelle's here. Is she with somebody?
Michelle Mueller is not on it. No, she's not able to attend today.
She's not. I spoke to her yesterday, and she was there for us all.
Everyone.
All right. Well, okay. So I had to talk to Michelle, and we've decided that we're probably going to move on from the email list, and we'll set up a forum. So more on that at some time in the future. Everybody knows to go to the resources page on Formbird website, and we'll to see the latest recording, which I usually try and get up by Monday the next week. Obviously, you guys don't need to see the recording, but other people, we always have the other recordings on their thing. So let's get into the main feature of today, which is Adam and Paul. Can I cross over to you, Adam?
Sure can.
You're there.
Let me just share my screen, and then I'll be good to go. All right, so today I just wanted to go through firstly the results of kind of that working group that we had set up on the risk assessment. So I'll give you a quick overview of that. Some further changes that we're working on around the fuel import to make it a little bit more friendly when you're doing your validations. Give you a bit of a look at the help center. Just reiterate the changes around the updating the primary meter that are coming with this release, and open up the floor for an opportunity for you guys to have your say as well. So that's kind of what we're going to go through. So on the risk assessment, Marie, sorry, I think you might have seen this before, but there's been a few changes as well. So we've got the risk assessment functionality now. It's available to configure, so you can create risk assessment check questions that appear on your risk assessment. And you can also create standard control measures. So Marie, that's like a new bit that we worked on after the last risk assessment meeting. To assign those to a particular group of assets, you can do that via an asset group mapping. By selecting risk assessment checks here. If you have any questions along the way and you want me to delve in any deeper to any of these items, feel free to ask me to do that.
Or if there's something from Paul A that has something to say.
Particularly Paul A, if I miss anything, feel free to pull me up on that as well.
Sure.
So that's just kind of a quick little overview of the config process. Where there's two methods that you can use a risk assessment. You can use it as a work order. So on a repair request, for example, you can create a new risk assessment work order, which I've already opened one up. This is what the risk assessment work order looks like, very similar to the other work orders. You've got your work effort and your materials, etc. If I scroll down a little bit, we've got our risk assessment check questions. So you can respond yes, no, or not applicable to those check questions. Anything that you respond yes with will then be created as a risk item when you click the create risk item button. It'll give you a whole table of all your items that need to be managed, or risks that you've identified that need to be managed. You can open those up by clicking on the table, entering the table, go through this. You've got your hazard identified, your category, hazard comment. What the issue is, what the risk identified is, the potential injury or disease. You give it an initial risk rating, sorry. You've got your standard risk control measures as well. So in this case, I've selected fix the item to the plant. You can also add additional ones. And then you've got your secondary risk rating after the control measures have been implemented. A new bit that we added in after the last meeting, Marie, is a risk assessment outcome. So an overall outcome of the risk assessment work order, whether it was satisfactory and the risks are below the threshold, or unsatisfactory and they're not. And you've got your signatures as well to do sign off should you want to do that. There's one thing I missed up here as well. If I go back up to this section. So these are your standard configured checks that you've decided you want. If the person filling out the risk assessment wants to add in something else that they found that's not covered in these, they can do so via this one here. So you could say, I don't know, what was I going to say? Obscured vision for driver. We can create that risk item. So that's added into this table here, and then I can go into this particular risk item and manage that risk in the same way. So you can see you've got your category, your comment, your injury, your ratings, etc., etc., etc. Very similarly. Any questions? Have I missed anything, Paul A?
No, that's a nice brief overview. I think,
yeah,
the risk assessment, the way to actually get that mapped to the asset. Did you cover that bit?
I did very briefly via the asset group mapping document.
Yep. So they were the checks though. So
oh yeah, sorry.
You also need to
how you make it available.
Make it available as a request.
As
a sort of work order.
To make it available for a particular group of assets, so for example, passenger vehicles, you need to add it into the work orders that are available for that group of assets. It's a good kind of reminder here that you can actually configure largely what work orders you want available for what assets. So that's very configurable per client environment. Dion, have you got a question there?
Yeah, Adam, just wondering, is there room for actions to be recorded on that assessment? Because obviously when you do find a risk, there has to be a control measure implemented and needs to be actioned.
Yep, so you've got your control measures here that you can select. So you just select it by clicking on the item in the grid. You can also add in additional ones. Again, if your standard control measures don't cover what needs to be done, you can add in additional notes about what actions you've taken. Does that cover what you're asking?
Yeah, and do they get signed off once the actions are completed?
Yeah, so not individual actions, but the whole risk assessment would be signed off at the end. How's that, Dion?
Yeah, that looks like it's all covered. Thanks for that.
Cool.
Those actions that you take, Dion, might also generate additional work orders. So there'd be extra information that you could capture via the standard work order process.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. No, that's good. Perfect.
I mean, it doesn't do that automatically, but you know, the option is there to generate another work order that says, okay, we found this, now go and fix that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So manually raise it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that could be, you know, a new request, or it could be a new work order under this parent request.
Yep. Perfect.
And then there's a second way, second bit of functionality that we've created to do risk assessments, which instead of creating its own standalone work order, you can also create it as part of an existing work order. So, for example, a repair work order. To configure this, you use the repair types. And in this instance, I have used, this is really in the way for me, the body and tray. So you can select related questions. Notably, this is also where you configure what questionnaires you want available for which repair types. So I've added in my risk assessment questionnaire to my body and tray repair type. So that means that on the repair work order, when I select body tray in the repair type, that gives me these questionnaires that are available. To create a risk assessment questionnaire from this, I select it from the grid, click create questionnaires. And that gives me a risk assessment questionnaire, which operates in the exact same way as the work order. So I won't go through that in detail, but you can see it's the same document essentially. Make sense? Questions? All good? All right, great, I'll move on.
Has anyone? No, just hang on a sec. Has anyone, Marie or Dion or anyone actually had a bit of a look at the risk assessment at all? What's the sort of status? I haven't sort of followed up the last 2 weeks, or you know.
No, I haven't had a look at it in detail at all.
No.
Yeah, no, I haven't either. Unfortunately, haven't had a chance.
No worries. That's okay. That's okay. What do you guys sort of see as the most useful next steps? Do you want us to run another sort of workshop and just sort of put some time aside and go through it sort of super slow, and or is it really just, you know, letting you loose on and having a good play, or what do you think is the best way for us to help you guys to make sure it's as close as possible?
I think having a play around first.
Yep.
And then doing maybe another session after that for feedback.
Okay.
Yep, agree.
Okay.
Yep, same. Looks good.
So Marie, this has gone to your production machine now.
Cool.
So you could play with it there, or you could play with it in the beta test, depending on whether you depending on what sort of playing you want to do, I guess. But yeah, it's in 2 places.
Well, thank you. I'll have a go.
Now this next bit is a little bit that we've been working on that's not in this release, but we wanted to show you anyway because we think it's kind of cool. Paul's been working on with a bit of help from Pete as well. So with the fuel imports, I've just already kind of preset all of this stuff. So I've already clicked validate fuel data.
Just slow down just a little bit. Explain it just a bit slower there, Adam.
Yeah, no problems. I do tend to rush, don't I, Mark?
Oh, you do. You
yeah,
do.
yeah. It's a horrible
race
habit
to
of
the
mine.
end.
It isn't, no. So I've got my fuel import here. I've selected my mapping document. I've imported my file. So this is the data in my from my file, which I've kind of got over here. If you want to see it, I just made a little bit of test data for myself. I've clicked validate fuel data. I don't have a header, so I don't have ignore header ticked. And then, so this is my validation result. So you've got the checkbox here that you can hide the successful ones. So you only see the ones that you want to view. You can see your errors are displayed on the right-hand side here. You can also search this file. So if I only want to see 987, for example, it's going to work for me, Paul.
It's a bad example because they've all got 987.
Because they've all got 987.
Yeah, oh yeah, it is a bad example, isn't it? What I really want to type in is
it did search for 987.
Yeah, 765 is what I wanted to search for. You're right. So you can see by typing in the search field here, you can filter the results in this table.
Adam, could you just ask? What can I ask you? How did this feature come to you?
The latest iteration?
No. Just give us a little bit of background into the importing fuel thing.
I guess my understanding of the fuel imports is that it adds to the total whole of life costs of the asset. Would that be right, Marie?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's got that function. It's also been an integral part of the application for updating the primary meters on assets, which in turn triggers service PM schedules as well, PM services. So they're kind of the two important things. I guess it's also a tool to validate what not so much operators, but the attendants at service stations are putting in as the odometer reading when they're doing the transactions. It's the way I understand it works.
Also for utilisation as well. You can see that how many litres per 100 kilometres vehicles are travelling, if they're you know, high fuel users, that kind of thing.
Thank you, Marie.
So this is something that you've asked for, Marie?
Oh, it's a fundamental requirement of the whole application, Paulie.
Yeah.
See, how much do I know?
I think everybody would want this.
The fuel import's been there the whole way along. And this is one of many iterations of improving the functionality to make it more usable. So I think originally we just had like the validation table, but now then the latest release has a dialog box that pops up that you can. So when you click on a row with a bit of data, it shows up in a dialog box. But that's kind of, we got some feedback almost immediately with the release into beta that's actually kind of inconvenient because it appears over the data that you're looking at, which is a bit frustrating. So what we've done is we've moved it. Well, I say we, but really Paul has done. We've moved the table across a little bit and added on this bit on the side here where you can see the range of the asset, the tank capacity of the asset's current primary meter at the time of the fuel import, the purchase date of the fuel, the receipt meter, and the litres. So this has really been constructed based off feedback from Bundaberg primarily about what data they wanted to see in this, what is currently a dialog box in beta, but is now moving to this table on the side here. What do you call this, Paul?
I don't know, table on the side.
Okay, good. I'm on the right track there.
Table on the side, yeah.
A table on the side I like.
Adam, can I just interrupt? The information in that table is information that Bundaberg asked for. So it does. The first three rows are asset information.
Yep.
And the next three rows are the last meter, the last fuel import. The highest of the last fuel imports, if you like. So that's the sort of base that you're working from now. So, you know, if it was imported 6 months ago, last month, then that would be the meter there, the last and highest reading of that.
Yeah, so not on this import, the previous one that's already been completed.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. And extremely recently, we've put in this ability to update the meter for this particular reading. So for instance, this one here, it's said that it's exceeds the tank range. So you look at that and say, oh, okay, the vehicle's traveled a little bit far. What's that about? And then you could look at it and see that it's, you know, got an extra 0 on it or something like that, and actually correct it in this field here and press update. So that's just a little bit of an improvements we're working on to the fuel import process to make it a little bit easier to work through those items.
Yeah, whereas
it'll help out for utilisation as well and running of the schedule as well. All of that kind of works in together, so that's quite neat.
Yeah, I think it's getting to a really good point now. Definitely.
Yeah. I really like that it that's got that quick clear indicator of the tank capacity exceeded and the tank range, because that's stuff that we used to use for a utilisation report and an exception report to pick up any of these issues previously. So that's quite cool. I like that.
Ooh.
Not
I
to be
like
stupid,
the easy updating of the odometer reading. That's really good.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Ngaire, what does tank capacity exceeded mean?
It means that while you may have a maximum tank capacity of 70 litres, it could be dead empty and it's taken 75 litres. So when you go to do that fuel import, because it's an extra 5 litres over, it's going to come up and throw that exception. So we find that with vehicles that are on dead empty that get filled up, they will take an extra maybe 5 or 10% of that tank capacity.
Oh, thanks.
No worries.
And why is that useful, Ngaire, to know that it's gone to dead empty? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah,
well, just in case there's a jerry can in the boot.
Yeah, sometimes they've got extra fuel. Yes, that's right. Exactly right.
That's exactly what it's
they
for.
Sometimes need a backup. Yep.
That would never
rarely
happen.
the tank would be dead empty.
To be honest, I've actually had to investigate the jerry can in the boot scenario in real life.
Me too.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that'll be involved in the next release. So unfortunately, not quite in this one, but the next one it will be in. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the just reiterate. I think I spoke about it briefly last month, but I just wanted to reiterate the process for the primary meter updating on the actual asset moving forwards. So from this release that you're getting this week, the primary meter readings will be the primary meters from the daily driver check sheets, will be able to be used to update the primary meter on the asset. Everyone with me? Yep. So previously, it's really been only driven off this fuel import, and it would occur when the fuel import, when the import fuel data button was clicked. That would update the primary meter on the asset at that point in time. Moving forwards, it'll be a nightly check, so it'll go and look and see, okay, what fuel receipts do I have for this asset? What's the highest value of those? What daily driver check sheets do I have completed in the last 24 hours? What's the highest of those? Well, what's the value on those? It'll look at those two things and say, okay, I want to use the daily driver check sheet, for example, if there hasn't been a fuel import done in the last 24 hours, probably. The issue that we kind of came across with that was that how do we know what to use essentially, and how do we know that what's entered on the daily driver check sheet is a reliable bit of data? What we didn't want to do is take that blindly and say, if the asset's on 22,000 kilometers now and the next entry is 22,000 or 222,000, for example, they've put an extra number on there. We didn't want to take those bits of data, so we had to kind of come up with some kind of parameter to say, oh, that's a dodgy bit of data, let's not use that. We'll just skip using that bit of daily driver check sheet information essentially. So what those parameters are, just so you all know, is if the primary meter reading is within 1,600 kilometers of the previous primary meter, it won't use that data in updating the asset primary meter. Or in the case of an hour's primary meter, if it's within 24 hours, the reading on the primary meter is within 24 hours, it won't use that data. We've started with quite loose parameters or restrictions, I guess, on what we use. But we are really open to changing those if they're way too loose or it causes problems or anything like that. We just kind of needed a starting point. What that means in terms of how the asset primary meter is updated is essentially if you get one reading on day one, that's fine. We won't use that one because it's got nothing to measure against. The next reading the next day, if that's within those parameters, it will be used to update the asset primary meter. If it's not within those parameters, we'll chuck it away and we'll treat it then as that the asset doesn't have a reliable daily driver check sheet reading to go off. So you'll need to have another day of entry and then another day after that that falls within those parameters for that reading to be used. Just to give you an overview of how that's going to work. So you might not get every daily driver check sheet reading actually updating the asset primary meter essentially. That kind of made sense. I think I might have talked around it a little bit, but hopefully it kind of makes some sense.
How about the GEOTAB?
GEOTAB, Paul, do you want to talk about GEOTAB?
Yeah, so all of that is true unless you're running GEOTAB, in which case it just takes GEOTAB and discards anything else. So for those assets that bring back a GEOTAB reading, we'll just take that and remove. And the fuel is not used, and the data drivers are not used. So it prioritizes what we think is the most accurate piece of data.
Cool. Thanks, Paul. Any questions about how that process is happening moving forwards? No. Okay. Cool. Move
that
on.
Looks good.
All right. Give us feedback by all means once you start using it. The next one, I just wanted to kind of introduce the help center that we've been working on. It's definitely a work in progress, doesn't cover everything. Basically, as people ask questions of me about how to do something, I note it down into a guide, for example. So it's a good one here, adding a new asset, for example, and it's just some quick instructions about how to add a new asset. So if you come up with anything that you think should be in here and you really want it made and available, then feel free to shout out. But that'll just be built on over time. We've also got some kind of more extensive documents around different things, like the detailed, PM schedule stuff. And also I'm trying to, this is a bit of a kind of an experiment, I guess, of creating some example documents. So BRC were kind enough to share their instruction manual for their techs and supervisors. And we're happy for us to share it. So I've put that up on the in this example document section. So if you have anything else that you think would be useful to share any of our sites, then I think it could be a really good way to share information between all the councils. All right, that's kind of it from me. Paul, do you want to add anything, talk about anything else?
No,
kind of good.
Good job, Adam. Thanks.
Nice. I haven't talked for too long, I think. I think it's been okay. Is there any kind of, as we kind of move into this next phase of development, are there any areas of the application that anybody really wants us to focus on or look at?
Since we've implemented our gone live last week, the mechanics, I think maybe we operate a little bit differently to everybody else, but our mechanics want to be able to just do their own worksheets rather than creating a works request first and then a work order. They want to just go in and create their work order and it's done that way. They find it that they're repeating by doing a works request and then doing a work order. You're just repeating the information, and it's easier. It'd be easier for them because what happens is the vehicle will just rock up. It drives off the street. One of our trucks will just come off the street. Oh, I've got a broken headlight globe. Can you replace it? The mechanic will just go bang, do it straight away. So our supervisors don't do a work request and then allocate it to a mechanic. The mechanic will just carry out the work and then fill out a worksheet. Is there a way that we can do that?
The issue with that, Marie, we've often had that with all our works management, is that they're actually they're two different kind of entities of information. And as soon as you sort of eliminate one, you're losing the data. And what you'll find is you want to shift it towards the other, as in you want request data to put on the work order data in order to achieve that. And then what happens is there's a mixture of kind of metaphors, and particularly then when you say, oh, well, I want to also group the work orders together. So then you run into a real problem in the sense that you've sort of destroyed your grouping capability. So the whole point of the request is really to define from the customer's perspective, but no work is performed on it. So this is like, here is the problem. The customer's giving me a problem. How did I solve it? Now I might only do one work order. So the better thing would be to look at the sort of rapid. So what we've done in, say, the water industry and what have you, is where it, for instance, automatically creates the two of them in one go. And then if they want to add to it, they can keep adding to it. So more having a sort of hot button which says, oh, I want this type of work, you know, the quick job, and it'll create the work request, create the work order, and then they start filling out the work order, and then they close it all off. The danger you always have is once you start breaking that, you start running down a sort of path of, oh, well, sometimes we want to like that, but you've already destroyed the data. You know, it's kind of like you've started to mess things up. So it's a matter of looking at not the data content, but, you know, what the actual issue is. And the actual issue is kind of, it could be training, it could be speed of, you know, entry, it could be, so look at the real problem, not what the result is, because the danger will be is all of a sudden you'll actually have, you know, you can't sort of be half pregnant on it, if you know what I mean. You know, you can't sort of say, oh, we want it to automatically know when we need one and automatically know when we don't. But the whole point is that there is some very valuable information between the two that you know, goes into managing the jobs, understanding what's being requested versus what's being performed. You know, part of that whole process is to say, this was requested, but this was actually performed. So I'm getting this sort of request, but I'm actually performing this sort of work. So there's very valuable information between the two. So I think that if anything, we focus on not necessarily destroying that model, but making it simpler for them to achieve that, you know, the data entry side of it. You know, that is way more important, because, you know, when we've run down that path and what have you, you kind of, you end up getting yourself in a mess, because you want kind of both. You want all the information, but you don't want to do the data entry. You know, it's kind of, and it's a common issue with any system. So it's really a matter of making sure we streamline that data entry or that process. And like I said, in the water industry, how we did it is we didn't destroy that model at all, but we just had very certain ones, you know, the sort of bulk ones. So the call takers, for instance, hit one button, and sure, in you know, the 10% of cases, they have to go through the full process of creating, in their case, they call it a case in action, and they go and create the whole structure. But when they sort of the other 80%, they've got sort of 3 buttons which says this one, and it'll go bang, this one, go bang. Sure, they have to sort of close them off and do all that sort of process. But again, you could break it down that says, you know, they only feeling that, and then the office closes it off or what have you. But that would be kind of my feel and our experience, certainly in other industries as well, is that you got to be very careful of saying, I just want to like that, because, you know, that'll mean always, and then suddenly you'll go, well, hang on, I don't have all this data anymore. Well, yeah, well, we've got rid of it all in one foul swoop. And it actually was a big problem in our old, and we sort of hadn't figured it out for a long time in the first sort of 10 years of our works management experience. And if you look at a lot of asset systems, they actually mess with that. They mess with what the customers are asking for and what was actually performed. And sometimes, and that comes down to even simple sort of classifications. And it was sort of a bit of a, oh yeah moment, you know, probably 10, 15 years ago, when we sort of thought, okay, there is actually 2 of them, you know, because we end up with sort of the one job, and you had the classification, and the field crew would always say, well, it was wrongly classified, so I would reclassify it. But then the office would say, no, but that's what the customer said, you know. And then we had sort of 2 fields, and then you start, well, once you look at the 2 of them, you start breaking down a lot more. And so it's the same with what we're doing. Even though a lot of it's internal, you still have, you know, the service request, and then you'll have maybe the service work order 90% of the time. But let's say you do another repair. Well, that's really valuable that you know that they were done together under that service request, because you're actually doing, you know, unscheduled and a scheduled bit of work under that one, what was a scheduled service. And if you don't have that, you suddenly sort of lost it. It's like, okay, we've done a service and we've done an unscheduled, but was it actually together? Was it, you know, there was no association. So I think the big thing, sorry,
I was going to say, so Marie, you went live last week.
Yeah.
Oh, you're the April Fool, yeah?
Yeah.
Did you like my joke? No. So you had, did you have that's obviously your first thing that's popped up.
Mm.
Was there a positive one that popped up as well?
On our behalf, me and Eleanor, we love the system. The mechanics, it's all different. It's new to them. Yeah. The only thing we have issues, it's extremely slow. Very, very, very slow.
Right. Again, you love it, but
Slow.
it's slow.
But other than that, no, it's all positive from us.
Yeah.
Slow on the devices or slow on your network? Because
slow on my network. It took me 2 minutes just to dispose of a vehicle.
Okay, we'll have to have a look at that, why that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've, Marie, just so you know, we've started looking at that disposal and the asset to try and speed up that process. Paul and I were talking about it this morning to try and improve that for you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, because I think that's what's deterring the mechanics a bit as well, because the slowness on the tablets.
Yeah. Yeah, Marie, but Don from Bundy.
Yeah.
We had the same sort of questions at the beginning too, Maria, from the text, where it was taking them longer to obviously do their normal work requests.
Yep.
But within sort of 6 weeks, you know, it's second nature to them now. They don't think about it. So it's one of the many questions that were raised initially. And look, it's, as I said, they go through the process pretty easily these days. Those questions got dropped within 6 weeks.
Beautiful. Yeah, we said that to them. It's just going to take time. Once you get used to it, it'll be second nature.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a very common thing with all sort of new technology, you know, with any of our projects or any technology we've ever done. There's always that sort of push through barrier. You know, I remember having the same conversation with one of the guys up at Bundaberg, Sean, in the water, which he's come onto these things, Sean from water. He was doing his first project, which was deploying to doing assessments of hydrants, water hydrants. And the guys, you know, his sort of first day, it was like, oh, it's all, the world's gone to shit. And I said, just, you got to steer the course. You're the captain. Just be confident. And then by day 5, it was sort of like, don't take it off us. You know, it's doing the job.
Yeah.
So you do have to sort of, and it's filtering out the noise too. Just sort of, you've got to sort of tolerate through, and then suddenly, because it often flicks from this is way too confusing to you don't have enough functionality. You know.
Well, we had one mechanic who Googled your company and Googled the system and said, no, you can make these changes. And we're like, well, no. He delved that deep.
We'll give him a development login.
Yeah. That's commitment, Marie.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if it's commitment or fear of change.
I'd go the second one, but
You have to remember the website's mostly devoted to marketing.
True.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only other thing, I wasn't going to go into it, but I suppose just as little, and I don't know whether Donnie wants to go into it. We had a very good session. I had a part of my trip to FNQ. Well, it's not really FNQ, is it, Donnie? It's just Queensland, mid Queensland. So I spent one day with Donnie and Cherie and Ngaire and Ben's even there, and Ben last week, which was actually very productive. We were really focusing on the process of the scheduling of what do you call it technically, Don? Scheduled maintenance plan or scheduled maintenance dates and times?
Yeah,
and
pretty much the triggers for the scheduled maintenance, how it's triggered in the system. So, yep. It was a really good discussion, and we definitely got to the bottom of it after about 3 hours of breaking it and coming back to the board and breaking it again. So, but yeah, very valuable. We've come up with a solution, I believe, and yep.
We may have almost been broken by the end of it, Don.
Yeah. Yep.
I tried hard. I put Donnie on the spot a couple of times.
Yes, you did. I won't forget that. Thanks very much, Mark.
Can Donnie or Ngaire just expand a little bit about what it is, for those who have no idea what you're talking about?
So it's basically, yep. Yeah, you fire away, Ngaire. Go for your life.
No, you go with
You're the
this one.
scheduler. It's your role. You go for your life.
Okay, so in the service configurations for your standard setup, instead of your logbook, we found that we needed a different matrix in the background that predicted and generated our services. So instead of it being very strict, very regimented, we needed it to be, if the dealership said, or the manufacturer said that there was a service at 12 months or 10,000 kilometres, we had to work on every different component to say whether or not it meant both those targets, if it was under, if it was over, if it was every combination of over, under, over, under. And that's just going to twist with your head a little bit and make you laugh. So yeah, it was basically about that matrix setup and whether or not we could break it and get it to work so that we've got a new approach to our preventative maintenance setup. So
it sounds a bit like if you got a duck, a chicken, and a rabbit, and how do you get them across the river and all that? Is that what was a bit like?
Perfect, Paul. Perfect.
Yeah, I've got no idea. A fox. Yeah, you've got to have a fox in there somewhere.
Yeah.
There's a fox.
A little bit of interesting background on it is that Don had actually, you can explain a little bit on this, Don. You actually contacted a number of manufacturers and what have you, hadn't you?
I had, yeah. I contacted a couple of bigger trucking manufacturers locally, and a couple of them scratched their head and couldn't actually come up with a solution, which is quite scary for the particular manufacturers I was speaking to. And a couple came up with their idea of it, but none of them really met the solution that we came up with. And I think they'd be really happy to get their hands on what we've come up with, to be honest. I think it's a great solution. So yeah, pretty scary, the fact that a couple of the major manufacturers couldn't actually come up with a solution on how they go about what we did. So yeah.
To the greater community, it just basically allows us that when we're generating our service request to make sure that we stay within the warranty and compliance period and that we do meet all of those requirements and don't go outside of the scope. So regardless of when the service is done, if it's by time, kilometres, hours, or fuel consumption, if any of those factors are hit first, we're still within that compliance period and that warranty period.
Yeah. Oh, beautifully explained. I almost understand.
That's very good, Ngaire, because it really is. That was what I think that's really what the complexity was, isn't it, Donnie? That the guys, you had to look at it from two dimensions, from both the warranty dimension as well as the practical mechanical servicing dimension. And
correct. Yeah.
And we often looked at one and not the other, and then the implications of one versus the other. And
yeah, we thought there was probably one rule set around it, Mark. I think we ended up with like 4 rule sets at the end of it.
Yeah, so the workshop started with, and I'll go put poor Donnie on the thing. He tells me on the whiteboard, this is the way it should go. This never gets adjusted. And then within 15
you broke
minutes,
that in 2 minutes.
Okay, this is the example. Okay, except for when... No, it was a really excellent workshop because, I think it actually, and the actual solution was way simpler in the end than probably what we thought, which is always a good sign.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
good work, everybody. It was great healthy discussion.
Yeah. So anyway, we look forward to Paul giving Paul and Adam a little bit of brain damage, but I think that they're
we've added a little bit extra to that from a meeting yesterday about adding the fuel side of it, the import. But anyway, that's pretty much.
It doesn't impact the rules, does it, Donnie?
Fractionally, yes. There's a couple of rule sets around the fuel. No, not the rules we put together. No, it just adds 2 more.
No.
Yep.
No.
Yep.
So,
Beautiful.
Adam and Paul, if you don't talk to us for the next 6 months, I'll understand why. I'm really sorry in advance, but I'm sure that you will love it at the end just as much as we do.
Mark gave us a look on Monday, and it looks like a good solution and a very productive discussion.
Yeah,
we'll still talk to you basically. It's okay.
Yeah, I think. Oh, that's good. Awesome. I think it will resolve all the issues that we've had previously that we've discussed. So yeah, it should be cool moving forward.
Yeah, lots of improvements.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think we're probably about there. Does anybody have? We want to stay within the hour. So I just, does anyone have anything final things they want to say? Mark, do you have anything final you want to say?
No, I don't think so. I think what we'll do is we'll wait on. We won't do much more, anything more on risk at this point. I think we'll let people look at it. That's probably about the only thing. Is that okay, Marie? I hope that's We'll leave it in your court, batting it back. Is that okay, Dion, as well? You're fine with that? You'll some point get a chance to look at it, and we'll make some decisions around it.
We missed you, Marie, because you're on mute, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Yep.
Yep, cool.
But that'll be fine.
What I will do is, I think Paul was talking about Michelle, who's been pulled away. She wanted to actually have a little bit, she wanted either part of this session or a separate session look at kind of future development and how we can have a discussions, like a technical workshops around some of those things. You know, a bit like we've done. I think, you know, probably the risk has been our first one where, you know, you guys sort of triggered it. We kind of knew there was always a good thing to do, but then you've really helped us sort of get it through and what have you. I suppose we want to make sure we sort of keep that going to a degree. And I suppose what we're interested in is people who, you know, if you've got topics or items that you really want us focusing on, again, we don't know what we don't know. So if you don't sort of raise it and get concerned about it or what have you, then, you know, we won't know about it.
Yeah.
You know, one of the ones that we're talking about that's been on our plate for a long time, but we haven't really tackled is the 10-year replacement plan and how you guys want that to sort of look. It's sort of been sort of sitting there. But, you know, that's one we'd like to, you know, because it's potentially not a terribly complex item. You know, it's really just generating a sheet based on all the data that's already in there. But it'd be a nice one just to even knock off and just get playing with. That'd be one idea, one item. But if there's any others, again, you know, it's a matter of just sort of prioritizing, also slotting it in so it's in there with the with where we are with the overall application. You know, we can't be way ahead of the horse and cart. So there might be a bit of a sequence that we need to put in place to get to that position.
Yeah. So Michelle's suggestion was also that, and for the minute, just if you do have a suggestion off the cuff, just email it to fleet@formbird.com. So very easy. And so her idea again is really that things that bubble out of the group or bubble out of conversations within your water cooler, they end up getting taken aside, and we devote 1 hour to that specifically, and which is sort of separate to the group, which is more about everything that's happening. So thank you for everybody for being part of today. There was lots of contribution, and good to hear your story, Michelle, and Marie. There was no Michelle. Sorry, I looked at Marie. So Marie, yeah, that was great. I love it. April Fools, very good. And you got a month and a half, 6 weeks. Someone said before it feels like you're not pushing it uphill, apparently. So we will end it there. And if you've got any suggestions for me for stuff that you want to bring in, anything, doesn't matter if it's fleet related. Oh no, it has to be fleet related. But if it's fleet related and it's something that you've heard of or you want us to look into, I can research stuff and present it. It doesn't matter. I'm interested in bringing interesting stuff to you guys. So thank you very much, everybody. And we'll see you next month. The invites will go out, et cetera. And good luck and keep on trucking.
What's your joke
Happy
next
Easter,
week?
everyone.
Next month's going to be Paul.
Next.
Oh, it's the bar very high.
Well, 1st of April. That was good. I'll be working on that one. I will be working on that one. On the timesheet, of course. So yeah.
See you, everyone.
See you later, everybody. Bye bye.
Happy Easter, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.